welcome to the deep dive. It is so great to have you with us today.
Absolutely. Really glad you're here listening in.
Yeah, and I want you to think about something right as we get started here. Have you ever felt completely stuck in a bad habit?
Or even just paralyzed by this vague, kind of lingering anxiety.
Right, exactly. Or weighed down by this heavy negative loop of self-talk that you just cannot seem to shake it no matter how much willpower you throw at it.
Yeah, that's a universal feeling.
It really is. And if you are nodding your head right now in the car or wherever you are, you're in exactly the right place. Because our mission today is a massive one.
We are going straight into the internal battlefield of the mind.
We are. We're going to figure out how to identify those self-destructive mental loops and understand the actual biological brain science behind why they happen in the first place.
Which is fascinating on its own.
Oh, totally. But most importantly, we're going to explore practical, intentional strategies to physically rewire your brain.
It really is a shortcut to mastering your own psychology. And the source material we're pulling from today is uniquely positioned to help us do exactly that. We're doing a deep dive into the insights from the book Winning the War in Your Mind by Craig Groeschel.
Which is such an interesting text.
It is. What makes it so compelling is how the author takes modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, basically, and cutting-edge neuroscience, and he overlays them with ancient biblical wisdom.
Right.
It's this synthesis that reveals how those ancient writers were often describing the exact same neurological phenomena that neuroscientists are, mapping out in laboratories today.
That overlap is what I find so fascinating because honestly, we all have those moments of total frustration with our own minds, right?
Oh, yeah.
You ask yourself, why do I keep doing the things I don't want to do? And why can't I just do the things I actually want to do?
We treat our brains like they're these mysterious black boxes actively working against us.
Right, but this material argues that it's not a mystery at all. There are mechanics at play here, so okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a foundational concept the author introduces right away, which is this idea that our lives are always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts.
Yeah, and you see that echoed in modern psychology, but also in ancient texts, like the writings of Solomon and the Apostle Paul.
But to really grasp how powerful an unchecked thought can be, we have to look at how we trap ourselves.
To illustrate that, the author shares this brilliant, honestly almost absurd story from the early days of his church.
I love this story.
It involves a guy on his staff named Pastor Kevin. So the staff used to play this highly competitive, ongoing game of capture the flag in their storefront offices.
Yeah.
The author describes it as holy violence. People were actually getting injured.
Which is hilarious.
Right, so they had to establish some ground rules, and the main one being absolutely no ambush attacks before 8 a.m.
A completely hilarious rule for a group of professional ministers to need, by the way.
It really paints a picture. Well, the author is an early riser. One morning, he gets to the office around 7 a.m. As he's walking down the hall, his intuition kicks in. He just senses that someone is lying in wait.
He feels it.
Yeah. So he walks up to a supply closet, throws the door open, and sitting right there in the pitch black is Pastor Kevin, completely silent, waiting patiently for the clock to strike 8 so he can launch a surprise attack.
Bust.
Exactly. So the author slams the door shut, wedges his foot against the bottom of it, and triumphantly announces, "You're going to spend the whole day in that closet, Kevin."
And this is where the psychology part comes in.
Yes. Here is where the psychology of belief takes center stage. The author decides to fake lock him in. He grabs a chair to wedge under the doorknob. He's laughing, shouting through the door, "I'm putting a chair under the doorknob."
But there's a problem, right?
That's right, a logistical problem. He can't get the chair to actually fit under the handle. And because his foot is holding the door shut, he can't walk away to find anything else to use as a lock. So the door is, in reality, completely unlocked.
There is no chair. There is no lock.
None. But Kevin can't see that from the inside.
Precisely. The author realizes that Kevin's reality is dictated entirely by what he believes is happening on the other side of that door.
So he projects total confidence.
Yeah, he shouts, "There's now a chair under the doorknob, Kevin. You cannot get out."
And what does Kevin do? He believes the lie.
He doesn't even try the handle.
No, he just starts banging on the door, shouting, "Let me out! I don't want to spend the day in here." The author is standing in the hallway silently laughing because Kevin is entirely free to leave. All he has to do is turn the knob.
That is wild. He was entirely constrained by an illusion.
But it gets better. The author eventually has to leave the hallway to conduct an 8 a.m. premarital counseling session in his office.
Oh, man.
So about 20 minutes into this very serious, solemn counseling appointment, he hears this scratching noise above his head.
I can picture this perfectly.
He looks up, one of the acoustic drop ceiling tiles slides back, and there are Kevin's eyes glaring down at him from the dark.
No way.
Yes, Kevin had literally scaled the shelves inside the closet and crawled through the building's ductwork and ceiling tiles to escape a room that was never locked.
Okay, that is an incredible visual, but I really have to stop and think about the implications of that for a second. He put himself through this massive, exhausting, physically demanding ordeal to overcome an obstacle that did not actually exist.
And that is the crux of this entire deep dive. A lie believed as truth will affect your life as if it were true.
I am.
To ground this historically, the author actually pairs this story with the legendary escapologist Harry Houdini.
Right.
Houdini's entire brand was that no lock could hold him. He would travel from city to city, walk into the local police station, and challenge them to lock him in their most secure cell.
Yeah.
He always escaped.
Always.
But one day, a jailer decided to play a psychological trick. When Houdini stepped into the cell and pulled the heavy iron door shut, the jailer put the key in the lock and secretly turned it in the wrong direction.
Oh, wow.
He unlocked the door, pocketed the key, and walked away.
So the door was open the whole time.
Yes. And Houdini spent hours sweating, struggling, picking at the mechanism, and completely failing to escape.
Because he was working against himself.
Exactly. Why did he fail? Because every time he manipulated the lock, he was unknowingly locking himself in. He was operating under the foundational belief that the door was secured. His belief in the lie became his actual prison.
That is fascinating, but I want to push back on this just a little bit to represent you listening right now. We can all point to harmless lies we believed that affected our behavior, right?
Sure.
Like, for instance, I definitely spent hours of my childhood shivering on the edge of the community pool because of the lie that if you swim within 30 minutes of eating a sandwich, you'll get stomach cramps and drown.
We all believe that one.
We know now that is completely medically false. But I sat there, constrained by the lie.
That's a harmless example, though. How does this translate to the deep, paralyzing mental blocks we experience as adults? I mean, there was a big jump between a pool myth and clinical anxiety.
It is a profound jump and comes down to the source and the intent of the lie.
The source material argues that we have a spiritual enemy, a deceiver, who utilizes this exact psychological mechanism to neutralize us.
Right.
If the enemy wants to steal your joy, destroy your potential, keep you from your purpose, he doesn't have to launch a frontal physical assault. He just has to convince you that the closet door is locked.
Wow.
He whispers lies. You are unworthy of love. Your past mistakes permanently define your future. You do not have what it takes to succeed.
And if you accept those?
If you accept those statements as reality,
Yeah.
you will never even try to turn the doorknob. You will sit in the dark, or you will exhaust yourself crawling through the ceiling tiles of life, trying to cope with a limitation that is actually a phantom.
Which begs the question, how do we figure out we're in the closet to begin with? Because nobody knows they were believing a lie.
No, of course not.
If they knew it was a lie, they wouldn't believe it. This naturally transitions us into how these phantom locks are actually constructed over time. The author gets incredibly vulnerable in the text here. He shares his own origin story of the specific childhood events that built his personal lie of inadequacy. And as I read through these, it really struck me how seemingly minor, ordinary moments can aggregate into a massive cognitive distortion.
Cognitive distortion is the perfect clinical term for it.
Yeah.
Our brains are meaning-making machines. We take isolated data points and we weave them into a comprehensive narrative about our identity.
Right.
The author breaks down exactly how his narrative of inadequacy was built block by block.
So he starts with growing up with very little money. He desperately wanted to fit in, so his mother would go to garage sales, buy used Izod socks.
Yeah, the alligator logos.
Yeah, she'd cut the little alligator logos off and painstakingly sew them onto his generic no-name polo shirts. So he walked the halls of his school looking like he had name-brand clothes, but internally, the result was that he felt fake. He knew he was an imposter. Then, a few years later in second grade, he discovers he's colorblind. He literally cannot see the world the way everyone else does. He can't even match his fake Izod shirts to his pants.
Yeah.
The internal result there, he felt defective.
And notice how the schema is forming here. One negative self-perception, I am fake, lays the foundation for the next day. I am defective. The brain starts looking for evidence to confirm this newly forming worldview.
And unfortunately, life provided plenty of evidence. He gets to the school spelling bee. He is given the word Mississippi. Now, we all know the song, right?
Oh, yeah. MISA.
Exactly. He knew the song, too. But under the pressure of the spotlight, he misplaces a letter and gets it wrong. The result, he felt stupid.
Yeah. Fast forward to fifth grade romance. He loses his girlfriend, a girl named Tiffany, to a guy named Brian.
Oh, Brian.
Brian had a motorcycle, and the author only had a moped. Tiffany actually told him that she wanted the Fonz, but he was just Richie Cunningham.
A devastating critique from a fifth grader. Brutal. But the internal result was that he felt lame. And overshadowing all of these isolated events was his dad's shadow. His father had played minor league baseball. He was a legitimate professional athlete.
Right, which is huge pressure for a kid.
Comparing himself to that standard made the author constantly doubt his own athletic abilities. So the final result, he felt totally inadequate.
So let's analyze this neurologically for a second. These aren't just sad memories. These are neural pathways being etched into the brain.
Right.
The brain is linking these emotional states, feeling fake, defective, stupid, lame, and inadequate, into a unified sense of self, and this entire structure climax during a massive, pivotal moment in his adult life.
The ordination.
Yes, he was pursuing his calling to be a minister. He goes through the grueling ordination process, stands before a committee of spiritual leaders, and he is flat out rejected.
They literally told him, quote, "Nice try, and for now it's a no. You don't have the gift mix."
Imagine the catastrophic psychological collapse in that moment.
I can't even...
As he was driving home in his red Geo Prism, the avalanche of negative thoughts crashed down on him. Every piece of childhood evidence was validated by this adult rejection.
Yeah, his brain was saying, see, the committee confirmed it.
Exactly. You are fake. You are defective. You are stupid. You are lame. You are inadequate. It was the ultimate fake lock, and the door was slammed shut.
So what broke the lock? Because he obviously didn't stay in that state, given that he's now a highly successful author and leader.
The source notes a specific turning point here. In the midst of this absolute despair, an entirely different voice broke through the internal noise.
Okay.
It wasn't the voice of his past failures, and it wasn't the voice of the ordination committee. It was God's voice, impressing a very clear counter-narrative into his mind.
What was it?
You are not who others say you are. You are who I say you are.
Yeah.
That is the moment the key turned in the lock.
But wait, I have to jump in here. That sounds like a beautiful, spontaneous, spiritual epiphany. But most people listening can't just sit around in their cars waiting to hear a booming voice from the heavens to fix their self-esteem, right? How do we practically, methodically engineer that kind of breakthrough?
That is exactly where the source material pivots from narrative to application.
Yeah.
You cannot rely on spontaneous epiphanies. You have to do the work of cognitive restructuring.
Right.
The text provides a very specific framework for this, called the thought audit. The premise is simple but really demanding. You cannot change what you do not confront.
Okay.
Most of us go through life completely unaware of the background hum of our own thoughts. The thought audit forces you to drag your inner monologue out into the light and categorize it into two distinct columns: defense thoughts and offense thoughts.
Okay, break that down for me. What does a defense thought look like in the wild?
Defense thoughts are your brain's evolutionary, protective, anxiety-driven reactions. They're designed to keep you safe from perceived threats, but they often act as prison walls.
So it's that overprotective instinct.
Exactly. You have to ruthlessly audit yourself. Am I constantly imagining worst-case scenarios? When my boss emails me, do I immediately assume I'm getting fired?
Guilty.
Right. Are my thoughts toxic? Do I constantly assume people are judging my appearance? These are lies masquerading as self-preservation. You're playing defense against a phantom opponent.
And the other column is offense thoughts.
Correct. Offense thoughts are constructive and expansive. You ask yourself, do my thoughts build me up? Do they inspire me to take faith-based risks?
Yeah.
Do they align with the foundational truth of who I am meant to be, rather than the fears of who I might become? If your audit reveals that your mind is spending 90% of its time playing defense, you are letting the lies dictate your reality.
Wow.
You have to confront the raw data of your own mind to realize which locks are actually keeping you safe and which ones are just an invisible chair under an unlocked doorknob.
Confronting the raw data of your own mind, that is heavy, but it makes total sense because once you audit your thoughts and you actually see the lies written down on paper, you can't just be neutral anymore.
No, you can't.
You have to fight back. The author points out that we are fundamentally in a war, even though most of the time we casually stroll through life acting like we aren't.
Right.
He makes this hilarious comparison to the World Thumb Wrestling Championship. Apparently, this is a real thing. Two grown adults with names like Under the Thumb and Jack the Gripper stare each other down across a tiny little wooden ring and say, 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare a thumb war.
Utterly ridiculous.
It is, but he uses it to highlight a contrast. The real war isn't some silly game. The real war is happening right above our eyebrows 24/7.
And yet our default posture is to treat the mind like a demilitarized zone.
Yeah.
The text uses a much more potent historical metaphor here. It compares our modern mental state to the United States' geopolitical position at the very beginning of World War II.
The neutrality aspect.
Right. For years, the U.S. maintained a strict policy of neutrality. The prevailing belief was that the war was over there, across the ocean, and it didn't really impact the homeland.
Until it did.
Until it did. It wasn't until the sudden devastating attack on Pearl Harbor that the illusion of neutrality was shattered and they were forced to engage. The author argues that we treat our minds with that exact same naive neutrality.
Oh man, that's so true.
We think we can passively scroll through social media, casually entertain toxic thoughts, binge negative news, and remain completely unaffected. But there is no neutral ground in the mind.
If you aren't taking ground, you're losing it.
Exactly. If you're not actively taking ground, you are losing it. You have to storm the beaches, much like D-Day, to reclaim the territory occupied by the enemy.
Storming the beaches of your own mind. That is an intense visual. But if we are mounting an offensive, what exactly are we attacking? I mean, a bad mood isn't exactly Omaha Beach.
No, a bad mood is just weather. We are attacking the architecture of the mind. We are attacking what the ancient biblical texts refer to as strongholds.
Stronghold.
Yes. And to really grasp the weight of this, we need to look at the original Greek word used by the Apostle Paul in his letters, ochroma.
Ochroma. Okay, what does that translate to in its original context?
In ancient military architecture, an ochroma wasn't just a tough spot or a bunker. It was a massive, literal fortress, usually constructed on the highest, most inaccessible peak of a city.
Like a citadel.
Exactly. It was surrounded by stone walls that could be up to 20 feet thick. It was the ultimate fallback position. When a city was overrun, the leaders and the elite guard would retreat into the ochroma because it was designed to be completely impenetrable to conventional weapons.
Okay, so how does that connect to the mind?
The source material argues that the lies we believe over a lifetime, those feelings of being fake, defective, or inadequate, they calcify into these fortified walls in our minds. They feel totally impenetrable to us.
Wow.
And here's the profound irony. The actual function of a psychological ochroma is to keep the truth out.
I see. Let me connect the dots here. If my personal stronghold, my ochroma, is the deeply held belief that I am always going to be a failure, that 20-foot thick wall of neural wiring is actively repelling any external evidence that I am actually competent. If someone compliments my work, my brain deflects it, it bounces off the wall.
Yep. They're just being nice, they don't mean it.
Exactly. The stronghold protects the lie from the truth.
Psychologists refer to this mechanism as confirmation bias or cognitive dissonance. When presented with truth that contradicts our core schema, our brains experience actual physical discomfort and will reject the truth to protect the stronghold.
That is wild.
And this is exactly why a simple, shallow, positive affirmation taped to your bathroom mirror doesn't work. You cannot just toss a pebble of positive thinking at a 20-foot stone wall and expect it to crumble.
Which brings us to another Greek word from the text, right? How do we actually take the wall down?
Yes. The word used for dealing with these strongholds is kathario, which is translated into English as demolish. But kathario doesn't mean carefully taking something apart piece by piece or gently dismantling it. It implies total destruction requiring massive, overwhelming power. Think of a multi-ton wrecking ball. You need disproportionate force to bring down an ochroma.
And this concept of disproportionate force is perfectly captured in the author's snow shoveling story.
Such a great story.
This is such a relatable moment. He talks about living in Oklahoma, and a massive, unexpected blizzard dumps feet of snow on his driveway.
Yeah.
He has to get his car out, so he bundles up, goes outside with a standard plastic snow shovel, and starts working. He spends 2 grueling, back-breaking, freezing hours shoveling.
Pouring in the hard work.
Yes, and after all that agony, he looks back and realizes he has only managed to clear a tiny, crooked little path. He says it was barely wide enough for a squirrel to walk through.
So defeating.
He is utterly exhausted and essentially defeated by the sheer volume of the obstacle. Just at that moment of despair, his neighbor drives up on a massive tractor equipped with a snowplow, drops the blade, and clears the entire driveway in about 3 minutes.
It is a brilliant, grounded analogy for the limits of the self-help movement versus true systemic transformation.
Right.
When we try to fight our deep-seated mental strongholds, decades of complex trauma, bad habits, and etched neural pathways with sheer human willpower, we're using shovel power.
Shovel power.
We are trying to outwork psychological architecture with a piece of plastic. And the tragic part is, shovel power feels like hard work.
Oh, it really does.
We sweat, we strive, we make New Year's resolutions, we white-knuckle our way through a week of a new diet or a new budget, but it only clears a tiny path for a brief moment.
And then the wind blows.
Exactly. The next snowfall, the next stressful event, the next fight with a spouse, the next bad day at work, it completely buries the path again.
Because willpower is a finite resource, it depletes over the course of the day.
Exactly. To truly demolish an Ochiroma, we need tractor power.
Yeah.
In the context of the source material's theological framework, this represents supernatural resurrection power.
Yeah.
It is the humble recognition that we cannot win this internal war in our own limited human strength. We need the overwhelming wrecking ball power of divine truth to do what our plastic shovels cannot.
But practically speaking, how do we get the keys to the tractor? I think everyone listening has tried shovel power and felt the exact exhaustion you're describing. How do we shift from striving to actually rewiring?
Well,
To understand that, we have to look at a concept the author illustrates with a dog named Max. This story completely shifted my perspective.
oh, Max the dog.
Max is this large, lovable, shaggy dog whose absolute favorite thing in the world is to chase cars and cats. But there's a catch. Max has a massive front yard, but he never, ever leaves the grass.
Never.
Cars drive by constantly. Neighborhood kids tease him from the street, bouncing balls right on the edge of the curb. Feral cats practically taunt him from the sidewalk. Max will run full speed toward the street, barking furiously, but the moment he reaches the edge of the grass, he slams on the brakes.
Just stops dead.
He just sits there, drooling and whining, wanting to chase them, but refusing to cross the invisible line. Why? Because the yard is equipped with an invisible electric fence.
Or, more accurately, there was an invisible electric fence.
Yes, that is the twist. The owners actually dug up the wire and returned the invisible fence system to the store years ago because it was malfunctioning and accidentally zapped a neighbor kid's ankle.
Oh, hell.
So the fence does not exist. There is zero electricity. There is no physical barrier whatsoever between Max and the street.
None at all.
But Max is entirely constrained by a ghost. He is constrained by the memory of a shock. When he was a puppy, he crossed that line a few times, felt a painful zap, and his canine brain wired a powerful association. Crossing this line equals immediate pain. Decades later, he is completely imprisoned by a lie that no longer has any basis in reality.
This is a perfect illustration of the psychological concept of learned helplessness, originally established by the psychologist Martin Seligman.
Learned helplessness.
Right. When a subject experiences repeated, unavoidable negative stimuli, they eventually learn that they have no control over their environment. They stop trying to escape, even when the barrier is removed.
That makes so much sense.
And the source material explicitly connects this psychological phenomenon to spiritual warfare. This is Satan's primary strategy. He does not need to build a literal physical cage around you. He just needs to use the invisible fence strategy.
How does that work?
He gives you just enough of a jolt of pain in a key area of your life to trigger learned helplessness, and then he lets your own mind do the rest of the work.
Give me an example of what that jolt looks like in human terms.
Think about a professional career. You step out of your comfort zone and take a major risk on a business venture. It fails spectacularly.
Ouch.
You get a massive psychological jolt of embarrassment, financial stress, public critique. The invisible fence is established. From that day on, you never take a career risk again. You stay safely in the middle of the yard. Or consider relationships. You open up and show genuine vulnerability to a partner. They betray you. You receive a devastating jolt of heartbreak.
Yeah.
Your brain wires that association vulnerability equals pain. So you build a wall. You date, but you never let anyone truly in again.
Because you remember the shock.
Exactly. The enemy is highly repetitive, not highly creative. He uses the exact same tactic he used with Eve in the Garden of Eden in the ancient Genesis account. He doesn't force her hand. He just plants a seed of doubt, a subtle lie, and lets human fear build the invisible fence.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though. If someone has gone through a severe betrayal or a massive failure, calling the invisible fence a quote-unquote lie feels a bit dismissive. Isn't that just trauma?
That's a very fair point.
And you can't just think your way out of clinical trauma. It's a physiological response in the nervous system.
That is a crucial distinction to make. The author is not dismissing severe clinical PTSD, which often requires intensive professional medical and therapeutic intervention.
Okay.
But CBT cognitive behavioral therapy, which heavily informs this text, differentiates between the original traumatic event, which was very real, and the generalized, self-limiting belief that the brain forms in response to the event.
Oh, I see.
The lie isn't that the betrayal hurt. The lie is the subsequent belief, because I was betrayed once, everyone will betray me, therefore I am unlovable.
The generalization.
That generalized conclusion is the phantom fence. And CBT addresses this through cognitive restructuring. The text introduces this as the replacement principle. It is elegantly simple to explain, but incredibly grueling to execute. You must remove the lies and actively replace them with truth.
How do we execute that?
The author outlines a very specific three-step process for cognitive restructuring. Step 1, identify the problem or the friction point. Step 2, ask probing, uncomfortable questions to get underneath the surface behavior. Step 3, pinpoint the specific lie at the root of it all.
Okay, let's see how that actually plays out in real life. The author gives a very poignant, painfully honest example of this from his own life, involving an outing to the Applewoods restaurant.
Yeah, Applewoods.
Now, Applewoods is a local legend in Oklahoma, famous for bringing out baskets of free apple fritters before your meal. It's a great spot. The author decides to take his oldest daughter, Katie, out for a special one-on-one birthday dinner. They sit down, the atmosphere is great, and he looks at his daughter and says, "Sweetheart, order absolutely whatever you want. It's your birthday. Don't even look at the prices." But when the waitress comes over to take their order, Katie completely freezes.
Oh, no.
She looks at the menu, looks at her dad, and her eyes well up with tears. She quietly says, "Dad, I can't. What I want costs too much money."
The gravity of that moment for a parent is immense.
Gut-wrenching.
It is a mirror being held up to his own behavior. The author realizes in a flash of terrible clarity that he has inadvertently passed his own deep-seated financial anxiety, his scarcity ruts directly onto his young, innocent child.
Which is incredibly ironic because the text notes that he and his wife had actually been incredibly disciplined and successfully paid off their entire home mortgage just 5 years into their marriage.
Right.
They had zero debt, they were financially incredibly secure, but his mind was still operating as if they were one missed paycheck away from living on the street.
Because the Ochiroma, the stronghold, doesn't care about your bank account balance. It cares about its own preservation.
Wow.
So the author realizes he has to apply the three-step replacement principle. Step 1, identify the problem. His daughter is paralyzed by fear over ordering a moderately priced birthday dinner because of money anxiety.
Okay.
Step 2, ask probing questions. Why is she afraid? Because she has spent her entire short life watching her father obsess over every single penny. She has watched him refuse to pay 50 cents to add a slice of cheese to a burger even though they have a paid-off house.
Yeah, kids pick up on that immediately.
Step 3, pinpoint the lie. What is the foundational belief driving this behavior? He realizes he had equated money with absolute security. He believed the lie that if he could just hoard enough cash, he could independently control his family's safety and guarantee their future.
He was relying on his bank account instead of relying on God as his provider. And that lie was acting as a fake lock, an invisible fence, not just restricting his own joy, but now restricting his daughter's.
Exactly. That is the tragedy of a stronghold. Its collateral damage almost always impacts the people closest to you.
That's a sobering thought.
But once you pinpoint the lie, you cannot just leave a vacuum. You have to actively replace it. And what's fascinating here is how the source material points directly to the historical Jesus of Nazareth as the ultimate model for this specific cognitive tool.
Oh, right.
If you look at the account in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus is fasting in the desert for 40 days. He is starving, physically exhausted, and isolated. He is essentially at his lowest physiological baseline. The text says Satan approaches him to tempt him with 3 distinct lies, targeting his identity, his hunger, and his power.
But Jesus doesn't debate him, right? He doesn't get into a philosophical argument.
No. He doesn't engage in debate, he doesn't use human logic, and he certainly doesn't try to use shovel power to just white-knuckle his way through the temptation. He actively and aggressively replaces every single lie with a specific, pre-memorized truth from ancient scripture.
Interesting.
When tempted to magically turn stones into bread to satisfy his immediate agonizing hunger, he countered with, "Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." He used the objective truth as a wrecking ball against the subjective lie. It was an active, offensive deployment of cognitive restructuring.
I love that. It's not just pious quoting, it's an aggressive cognitive defense. But I want to shift gears and get into the actual physical mechanics of this in the brain, because this is where my mind was totally blown. The author starts explaining this with another great car story, this time about his legendary 1979 brown Buick Century.
Oh yes, you have to paint the picture of this vehicle. It is essential.
It was the epitome of late 70s high school cool. It was a four-door, burnt brown boat of a car, complete with a massive, unnecessary spoiler on the back and giant, majestic eagle decals swooping down the side panels.
Incredible.
So, he is a teenager, he saves up his money from working odd jobs, and he buys a used Alpine stereo system so he can blast his cassette tapes.
Yeah.
But he's out of cash and can't afford professional installation, so he decides to wire it himself in his driveway.
Naturally.
He spends all day stripping wires, wrapping electrical tape, sweating under the dashboard. Finally, as the sun goes down, he turns the key, hits the power button, and it works. The music is pumping. He is thrilled. But the next morning, he gets in the car to drive to school, hits the power button, and absolutely nothing happens. It's totally dead. He is devastated. But then later that night, he goes to show a friend, and it magically works again.
So weird.
Day after day, it is completely dead in the daylight and works perfectly in the dark.
The punchline to this story is one of the best metaphors for neurobiology I have ever heard.
Right. Why did it only work at night? Because in his amateur wiring job under the dashboard, he had accidentally wired the Alpine stereo's power source directly to the car's headlights.
He could cross the line.
He crossed the wires. If he wanted to listen to Bon Jovi at 2 p.m. on a sunny Tuesday, he had to drive around with his headlights completely turned on.
And this brings us to the core neurological insight of the entire deep dive. At the beginning of this conversation, you asked the universal question, why do we do the things we don't want to do?
Yeah.
The answer is not that you are fundamentally broken or uniquely cursed or lacking in moral fiber. The biological answer is that you have crossed wires in your brain.
Crossed wires.
Why do you eat half a gallon of ice cream when you're feeling sad? Why do you impulsively go on an online shopping spree when you feel lonely? Why do you yell at your spouse when you are actually stressed about an email from your boss? It is because of crossed wires.
Okay, I need you to break that down. How does a wire cross in a human brain? I didn't reach in there with electrical tape.
It comes down to a principle known in neuroscience as Hebbian theory, which is often summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together.
Fire together, wire together.
Every single thought you have, no matter how fleeting, produces a measurable neurochemical change in your brain. When you repeat a thought or an action, the neurons involved in that process physically link closer together to create a neural pathway. The brain is obsessed with efficiency.
Right.
It wants to turn conscious effort into unconscious habit to save energy. The text uses a brilliant visceral visual for this, driving on the remote, unpaved dirt roads of Alaska during the muddy season of July. There's a famous sign warning drivers, choose your rut carefully. You'll be in it for the next 60 miles. Once a car's tires fall into a deep, muddy rut carved by massive trucks, the car practically drives itself. The walls of the rut are so high that you can literally let go of the steering wheel. Neural pathways are the deep Alaskan ruts in your brain.
That reminds me of his dog, Bandit. Bandit was this little miniature collie who had this massive, sprawling backyard to play in. But Bandit was a creature of intense habit. He ran the exact same circular path around a specific tree every single day.
Yeah.
Eventually, his little paws completely wore down the grass down to the bare dirt, creating this perfect, bizarre, alien-looking crop circle of dead grass. He didn't use the rest of the yard. He created a literal rut by running the same path over and over until it was permanently etched into the landscape.
Exactly. And your brain has two specific biological mechanisms designed to make these ruts incredibly deep and difficult to escape. The first is the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
I've heard of the RAS. It's like a filter, right?
Yeah. Yes. The RAS is a bundle of nerves located at the base of your brainstem. At any given second, your senses are bombarded with millions of pieces of data. The temperature of the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of your shirt against your skin.
It's too much.
Right. If your brain tried to process all of it consciously, you would go insane.
Mm-hmm.
So The RAS acts as the ultimate gatekeeper. It filters out 99% of the data and only lets through what it deems critically important. But here's the catch.
What's the catch?
The RAS determines what is important based entirely on your deeply established beliefs. If your neural rut is the belief that I am a victim and nobody respects me, your RAS will literally filter out the memory of your boss praising your work, and it will intensely highlight the memory of a coworker slightly frowning during your presentation. It actively curates your reality to reinforce the rut.
Wow, it actively hides evidence that contradicts the lie. That is terrifying.
And it gets worse, because the second mechanism is dopamine.
Dopamine.
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, often associated with pleasure, but it's really about reward and reinforcement. Let's trace how a bad habit forms a crossed wire. Say you go through a painful breakup. You feel terrible, you eat a warm, gooey chocolate brownie.
Classic.
The sugar hits your bloodstream, and suddenly your brain releases a massive hit of dopamine. It's a chemical reward. Your brain says, hey, that temporarily relieved our pain. Log that data. Do it again. The next time you feel sad, the brain remembers the pathway to the brownie. You do it again. The neurons fire together and they wire together. The pathway gets stronger. The Alaskan rut gets deeper. Eventually, the conscious decision-making process is bypassed entirely.
So you don't even think about it.
Right. The feeling of sadness automatically triggers the physical action of eating without you even consciously deciding to do it. The repetition forms a neurological crossed wire, where emotional distress is wired directly to a sugar fix.
That is incredibly validating to hear. It means that when I fail to break a bad habit, it's a massive biological and chemical process fighting against me, not just a lack of moral willpower.
Yes.
But obviously, we can't just throw our hands up and say, well, my neurons are wired, I guess I'm eating brownies forever. Which brings us to the solution in Section 6, digging trenches of truth. Because if we are stuck in these deep, muddy ruts with our hands off the steering wheel, how do we get the car out?
We have to dig.
The text makes it explicitly clear that standard behavior modification is doomed to fail. We mentioned this earlier with the shovel power, but the analogies here are visceral. Trying to stop a deeply ingrained habit just by saying, I promise I won't do it anymore, is like trying to kill an ugly, deeply rooted oak tree by climbing up and sawing off a single branch.
It does nothing to the root.
Exactly.
Right.
The root system is untouched. It will just grow another branch. Or, even crazier, the author compares it to getting a terminal lung cancer diagnosis and trying to cure it by sucking on a cherry cough drop. You are treating the surface-level symptom and completely ignoring the fatal root cause.
This is where the text makes a crucial defining linguistic and conceptual distinction between a rut and a trench.
Rut versus trench.
A rut, as we discussed with Bandit the dog or the muddy Alaskan road, is formed completely unintentionally. It happens by accident, usually in the mess and mud of life. It serves no constructive purpose, and it's actually inherently dangerous because it traps you and dictates your direction against your will.
Okay.
A trench, however, is a completely different piece of architecture. A trench is intentionally, painstakingly dug. Think of a massive irrigation trench on a farm.
Yeah.
It requires intense labor, strategic purpose, and meticulous planning.
Right.
And its ultimate goal is to deliver a necessary, life-giving resource like water to fix a specific problem, like a drought.
Right.
To win the war in our minds, we cannot just try to pave over our negative ruts. We need to intentionally pick up our shovels and dig new, competing trenches of truth.
Digging trenches of truth. I love the visual of moving dirt to create a new pathway for the water to flow. So how do we actually dig? We know shovel power doesn't work against the stronghold, but we still have to put in effort. The author says the digging instrument is the use of determining declarations. We have to craft specific, highly aggressive statements based on absolute truth to counter the lies. Let me give you some concrete examples from the text.
Please do.
Example 1. If your automatic rut is the lie, I am a victim, the world is against me, and nothing good ever happens to me, your new trench declaration, which the author draws directly from the book of Romans chapter 8, is, God is for me, so who can be against me? I am an overcomer.
That's powerful.
Example 2. To combat his own deep, paralyzing financial fears that we talked about with his daughter at the restaurant, the author didn't just use a weak affirmation like, I won't worry about money today.
Yeah.
He dug a massive trench with this specific declaration. He said, money is not and never will be a problem for me. My God is an abundant provider. Wait, let me avoid the pause there. My God is an abundant provider. I will lead the way with irrational generosity.
Notice the absolute certainty and the aggressive posture of those declarations. They aren't passive hopes. They aren't saying, I wish I felt better. They are linguistic wrecking balls aimed directly at the foundational load-bearing walls of the strongholds.
Right.
But to understand why these declarations actually work biologically, you have to understand the psychological law of exposure. This law dictates that the human mind ultimately absorbs, reflects, and becomes what it is exposed to the most.
That makes sense.
If you want to understand why this is such a brutal uphill battle, look at the neurological research cited in the text. The average human being experiences approximately 500 unintentional intrusive thoughts every single day.
Wait, 500 separate intrusive thoughts?
Yes, and research suggests each of those thoughts lasts, on average, about 14 seconds. If you do the math, that equates to nearly 2 solid hours of unwanted, toxic, fear-based thoughts bombarding your prefrontal cortex every single day. 2 hours.
2 hours of just pure mental garbage flooding the system.
You are constantly, relentlessly being exposed to the lies of the enemy.
You aren't good enough. They don't really like you. You're going to fail that presentation. Your spouse is pulling away. If we just sit there passively on the couch, the law of exposure guarantees we will absorb that toxicity and it will shape our reality.
Precisely. Which is why the text emphasizes the absolute necessity of Christian meditation.
Yeah.
Now, it makes a very clear and vital distinction here.
Between what?
In many modern secular mindfulness practices or Eastern philosophies, the goal of meditation is often to empty the mind, to detach from thought entirely, and to achieve a state of nothingness or neutral observation.
Right, clearing the mind.
But ancient biblical meditation is the exact opposite. It is not about emptying the mind. It is about aggressively filling the mind. It is actively using the law of exposure to your advantage by intentionally exposing your brain to the specific declarations you've created. You are forcing the neurons to fire together so they will wire together. You're digging the trench.
Okay, speaking of meditation and filling the mind, I want to move into how we actually process these declarations. And I have to warn everyone listening, the metaphor the author uses is a little gross, but it is incredibly sticky.
It is memorable, I'll give it that.
He looks at the ancient Hebrew words for meditate and notes that they often translate to the exact same word as ruminate. Now, in zoology, how do cows ruminate? They graze in the field, they get a massive mouthful of grass, chew it up, and swallow it. But they don't stop there. They regurgitate the partially digested grass, which is called cud, back up into their mouths, chew it some more, swallow it again, throw back up, chew it again, and they do it over and over and over.
It is a vivid, admittedly nauseating metaphor. But the biological purpose of rumination is brilliant. A cow does that because the cellulose in grass is incredibly tough to break down. By chewing it repeatedly over hours, the cow extracts the absolute maximum amount of latent nutrition from the grass.
And we should do that with our thoughts.
The author points out that this is exactly what we are supposed to do with our declarations of truth. We don't just read a positive Bible verse or a psychological affirmation once in the morning, check a box, and move on with our day. That's just swallowing it whole. We must chew on it.
Ruminate on it.
We bring it back up to our conscious mind while we are driving to work. We chew on it again. We examine every single word. We bring it up again while doing the dishes. We must extract maximum spiritual and neurological nutrition from it. We must fight repetition with repetition.
Because repetition is exactly how the lies got so deep in the first place. The text points out a fascinating glitch in the human psyche known as the illusory truth effect. It's a cognitive bias where if you repeat a false statement enough times, the human brain will eventually start to process it and accept it as absolute truth, regardless of the actual evidence.
Yes. The text gives some great cultural examples of this. Take the pervasive myth that human beings only use 10% of our brains.
I hear that all the time.
Scientifically, neurologically, that is completely false. MRI scans show that we use virtually every part of our brain throughout the day. Or the idea that taking massive megadoses of vitamin C will cure a common cold.
I used to do that.
Also false. Your body just excretes the excess. But because pop culture, movies, and society have repeated these phrases incessantly for decades, millions of people accept them as undisputed facts. The brain equates repetition with validity.
Which is terrifying when you think about our internal monologues.
The source explicitly states Satan isn't creative, he's repetitive. He is whispering the exact same lies to you today that he whispered 10 years ago in high school. Therefore, your counter strategy must be equally, fiercely repetitive. Write the truth, think it, confess it over and over till your brain wires it as reality.
And the ultimate goal of all this relentless rumination is to achieve a state called automaticity, Automaticity is when a behavior or a thought process has been repeated so many times that it becomes completely automatic. You do it without actively using your prefrontal cortex to think about it.
Like driving home.
Exactly. It's like taking a shower or driving your car on a familiar commute and suddenly realizing you're in your driveway and you don't remember the last 5 miles. The author loves inventing his own quirky words for modern automatic behaviors. He calls working from a coffee shop your Moffice mobile office. He calls people who constantly check their wrists watch watchers. He coined a lexicon for when you automatically ask your smart speaker a question without thinking.
Moffice is great.
These are all ingrained automatic behaviors.
In the context of our mental war, the ultimate goal is fluency. We want fluency in truth. The author illustrates the pain of acquiring this fluency with a deeply embarrassing but highly effective story from his high school years. He talks about being in French class.
Oh, the Pepe Le Pew story. I absolutely loved this. So he is a senior in high school. He's taken 4 years of French, and a beautiful French exchange student arrives at the school. He immediately decides he's going to impress her with his cosmopolitan language skills.
A bold move.
Very bold. He confidently walks up to her in the hallway and tries to speak French, but because he isn't actually fluent, what comes out of his mouth is English spoken with an atrocious, cartoonish, overly romantic French accent. He says something like, "Ooh, mon chéri," the devotion, the longing.
Yeah.
He immediately realizes he is dying out there. She looks at him like he's crazy, but gracefully starts speaking actual rapid-fire French to him, and in that moment, his brain goes into complete overdrive.
He's scrambling.
To have a conversation, he has to hear the French words, consciously translate them into English in his head, formulate an English response, mentally translate that response back into French vocabulary, ensure the verb tenses are correct, and then finally try to force his mouth to speak it. It is clunky, exhausting, agonizingly slow, and he looks like an idiot.
If we overlay the psychology on this story, he is describing the 4 stages of competence. He moved from unconscious incompetence, thinking he was good at French, to conscious incompetence, realizing how bad he was.
Right.
When he was translating word for word, he was in conscious competence. He could do it, but it required massive, draining effort from his prefrontal cortex. But he kept at it. He kept practicing, kept ruminating on the language. And eventually, a biological shift occurred. Something clicked. He bypassed the translation phase. She spoke in French, his brain understood the concepts directly in French, and he responded in French.
The wires uncrossed.
The wires uncrossed. The task physically moved from the conscious processing center of his brain to the basal ganglia, which handles automatic habits. He achieved unconscious competence. He achieved automaticity.
And that fluency is exactly what we want for our new trenches of truth. We want our brains to bypass the exhausting translation phase where we have to argue with our doubts and just automatically default to truth. And the text gives a phenomenal example of how this actually saved the author during a massive crisis. He describes going through an incredibly stressful tax season.
Oh, the tax stories.
Yeah, he and his wife thought they were getting a refund, but their CPA made a massive miscalculation, and he suddenly found out he owed thousands and thousands of dollars to the IRS. He wakes up at 2 a.m. heart pounding in an absolute cold sweat panic. The old Alaskan dirt rut of scarcity is pulling him in like a magnet. You don't have enough. You're going to go broke. You failed to protect your family. Panic.
But notice what he does next.
Right. Instead of just laying there, letting the anxiety spiral and deepen the old rut, he gets out of bed, he turns on a light, he completely interrupts the pattern, and he kicks up a heavy historical book called Fox's Book of Martyrs.
A heavy read for 2 a.m.
Seriously. But as he is reading about the intense life and death historical suffering of early Christians, his brain naturally gains perspective. And then his meticulously dug trenches of truth automatically kick in. The financial declarations he had been ruminating on for months echo in his mind without him even having to try. Money is not a problem for me. My God is an abundant provider.
It just happens naturally.
The new neural pathway engages, and it physically delivers a wash of peace over his nervous system instantly. The grueling translation phase of wrestling with fear is gone. He achieved automaticity. The tractor had cleared the snow.
It is a profound, beautiful shift from exhausting behavior modification to actual neurological and spiritual transformation. He didn't just suppress his panic. His brain literally processed the threat differently. But to maintain this level of freedom, we have to understand the final overarching piece of the puzzle.
What's that?
This brings us to how we view the world on a macro level. Lenses, filters, and cognitive biases. Because everything we've discussed so far, the locks, the ruts, the trenches, all operates underneath the specific filter through which we perceive reality itself.
Yes, and the author starts this section with a hilarious, almost sitcom-level story about his wife, Amy. They go out for a very romantic, expensive date night. The food is great, the mood is right, everything is perfect. They come home, and Amy decides to try on her brand-new prescription glasses that she had just picked up from the optometrist. She slides them on, looks at her husband in the romantic lighting, and her face drops. She says in this deeply concerned, slightly disgusted voice, "Craig, what is wrong with you? You look horrible. Your face is all discolored and sickly."
Which is definitely not the romantic conclusion to the evening he was anticipating.
Not at all. He is completely caught off guard. He suggests, "Hey, why don't you take the new glasses off for a second?" She slides them off, blinks, looks at him again and smiles. "Wow, you look good again."
The defective lenses.
The punchline is that the glasses had defective, discolored lenses. She literally could not see reality the way reality actually existed because she was looking through a fundamentally distorted filter.
And we all do this psychologically every single day.
Mm.
The text offers a brilliant, highly relatable thought experiment to prove this. Imagine you are walking up to the front door of a crowded dinner party. You're feeling good, you're confident, but right before you turn the doorknob, a trusted friend pulls you aside and whispers a devastating lie.
What's the lie?
"Just so you know, I overheard everyone talking, and they all think you're an absolute idiot. Good luck in there."
Oh man, my stomach would drop instantly.
Exactly. You walk
Okay.
in. Now, because you believe that lie, you have just put on defective lenses. You will interpret every single normal, benign interaction through that specific filter. The hostess greets you but forgets to take your coat. You immediately assume she is slighting you and wants you to leave because you're an idiot.
Yeah, you're looking for it.
You look across the room and see two people whispering and laughing in the corner.
Yeah.
You assume, without any evidence, that they are mocking your outfit. Your friend looks at his watch and says he has to leave early. You assume he is deeply embarrassed to be seen in the same room as you.
Same reality, just a normal party with people doing normal things, but a completely terrifying, isolating experience because of the filter.
Psychologists call this cognitive bias. It is a standard, consistent pattern of deviating from rational reality in how we process information. The text gives two great real-world examples of how cognitive bias dictates our experience.
Let's hear them.
Imagine a boss pulls two different employees into her office on the same day and gives them the exact same constructive critique of their latest project. Employee A, wearing a lens of growth and security, sees the feedback as a helpful tool for career advancement. They feel valued.
Makes sense.
Employee B, wearing a lens of insecurity and victimhood, receives the exact same words but is dumpily offended, assuming the boss is trying to get them fired. Or consider a religious context. Two people go to the exact same church service. The service is identical. One person, looking through a lens of cynicism and skepticism, sees a room full of hypocrites who only want their money. The other person, looking through a lens of grace and community, sees a room full of flawed, broken people genuinely trying to connect with God.
It is the exact same objective reality, but the subjective experience is completely divergent because of the filter.
It all comes down to the filter. And realizing that requires a massive surrender of our ego. The author confesses that his own defective filter led him to become a massive control freak. He tells stories about how his anxiety manifested as a need to dictate everything around him.
Oh yeah, the remote control story.
Yes, he talks about aggressively holding the TV remote so he can maniacally monitor 14 different shows at once, flipping channels the second a commercial hits. He even admits to being the guy who literally grabs the steering wheel from the passenger seat while someone else is driving the car just because he thinks they are braking too late.
That's intense.
He was terrified of not being in control. But the profound, liberating takeaway from the text here is this. Being in control of your circumstances is a complete illusion.
An illusion.
You cannot control what has happened to you in the past, no matter how much you analyze it. You cannot control what other people think of you. You cannot control the economy or your boss or the future. But, and this is the absolute key to winning the war in your mind, you can control how you perceive it. You possess the agency to reach up and take off the defective lenses.
It is the ultimate synthesis of the entire deep dive. You reclaim your true agency and power not by attempting to forcefully control the external world, but by intentionally restructuring the internal mind that perceives the world. Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and summarize the massive journey we have been on today. We started by learning how to spot the fake locks, the invisible fences, and deeply ingrained lies we believe that hold us hostage in unlocked closets.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We realized that simple behavior modification and sheer willpower are just chopping tiny branches off an ugly tree while leaving the toxic roots entirely intact. And we discovered the powerful biological science of how to dig intentional trenches of truth through aggressive, relentless rumination, actively rewiring our brain chemistry to achieve total automaticity in truth.
We've covered the psychological phenomena of cognitive dissonance and learned helplessness,
The neurological mechanics of the RAS and Hebbian wiring.
and the spiritual framework for demolishing strongholds. The tools are laid out on the table: the thought audit, the replacement principle, and the determining declarations. The question is whether we will pick up the shovel.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into winning the war in your mind, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Something to ruminate on.
Exactly. Think about the biggest point of friction in your life right now. What if the very anxiety, the deep frustration, or the massive mental block you are facing isn't actually a barrier meant to destroy you? What if it isn't a fake lock designed to keep you in the closet forever?
What is it then?
What if that specific agonizing pain point is actually the exact X marks the spot on the map where you are uniquely called to start digging your first trench of truth? What if the friction itself is the invitation to rewire your mind and step into freedom?
As a profound perspective shift, it turns the obstacle into the exact path forward.
The obstacle is the path. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope you feel incredibly equipped, scientifically informed, and spiritually empowered to start swinging that wrecking ball and demolishing those strongholds. Until next time, keep digging those trenches.